Welcome, everybody, to the September Chemical Consultants Network meeting. I'm Mike Michaelzek, the chair of CCN. Make sure my mic's not muted. Chemical Consultants Network is a group of chemists and chemical engineers that advise members who are consulting or interested in consulting. CCN provides expertise and resources to our members. We are a topical group of the Philly ACS section. We're also supported by AICHE. We hold monthly meetings on topics of interest, and for $35 per year, paid members can create a web page on the CCN website to attract clients. If you're interested in being a member, please sign up at chemicalconsultants.org. So that was our commercial for the evening. Our speaker tonight is James Chan from Asia Marketing and Management, a consultant firm specialized in advising U.S. clients on China and Asia. So I first heard of James when I became a consultant because I bought his book on Amazon. Let me see if it shows up. There it is, Spare Room Tycoon. So when I first became a consultant, I read James's book. It gave me a lot of insights. There's a picture that Joanne put on not the nuts and bolts of consulting, but the relationship aspect. And I liked it a lot. So tonight, James is going to talk about transaction versus relationship consulting. He's going to discuss his experience on relationship consulting and how it's benefited his career. And James is asked to please hold all the questions to the end, and then he'd be glad to answer them. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat or ask him at the end. So without further ado, James Chan.
Thank you, Mike. I'm very happy that you called me out of the blue. And the moment you asked me to talk, immediately I knew what I wanted to say. I began my one-person consulting practice in 1983. At that time, I was still working for a wholly owned subsidiary of Harcourt Brace Ivanovich. The subsidiary was called Academic Press. And many of you who are scientific, technical, medical, engineering people, I'm sure that you are aware of AP, Academic Press. I was the one who was responsible in opening the China market in 1981 to 1983 for AP. And because of my success there, as well as my success in helping the company triple its sales to Southeast Asia, I got, I like to use the word emboldened to set up my practice in the spring of 1983 when the company decided to fire 75% of us. I was part of the 25% ask to go to Orlando, and I decided to not go to Orlando, and I set up my practice. Now, when I set up my consulting practice, I really had no training, and I essentially had to teach myself one day at a time. When I first started, as you may know, if you are a practicing consultant, you know it is very difficult to get clients. So I was 33 years old, and in my mind, the most important thing was to get a client, a paying client. And billing by the hour, according to the book that I had bought and read, that billing by the hour was the normal thing to do. Yes, the book did mention working on a project basis, on a retainer basis. So I did understand vaguely, conceptually, the meaning of a retainer, which essentially, in my experience, is you ask a client for an arrangement which lasts for 1 year, and the two of you and your client agree on a sum of money, and you divide that sum into 12 installments, and you get paid monthly. And once you arrange to do that, there is no need for you on a month-to-month basis to add up all your hours and then justify, why you have to go to the bathroom and why would it take so long for you to take a shower. And in my case, should I bill or not bill during a 20-hour flight to China, something like that. But in the beginning, let me tell you honestly, to you and to myself, I really had no trust, no belief, no faith in the fact that I could get a retainer. Ironically, one of my first few clients actually started telling me that they would give me a retainer. It's really, to me, at that moment, I was so clueless. Even when they offered me, I was only half-hearted in saying yes. I don't know why. Maybe I'll tell you more as I go on. So I started doing billing by the hour, and my business, I happened to be at the right place at the right time. Business was good. And in the first 4 years of my practice, my income each year was better than the year before. So in a way, that I believe directly or indirectly bolster my own disbelief in the need for a retainer arrangement. Of course, in hindsight, I was wrong. You see, in all human actions, or all human actions presuppose two things: the will and the ability. If you have the will to do something, you will start to develop the ability to do it. In my case, as a young consultant with black hair, at age 33, 34, 35, 36, and even 37, I had no will to want to turn any client into a retainer client. But things quickly caught up. By that, I mean, by about 1987, my business dropped. And then in 1988, it was quite a pretty bad year. And I think a bad year, when I say bad, I didn't make enough income to have to pay federal tax. I mean, I still have to pay state and city taxes. And for a split second, I thought not being able to pay taxes is a good thing. I was totally wrong. I quickly learned, and I'm so happy to say that each year I pay sufficient taxes. And the more I pay, the more I console myself in saying, don't be sad. It's a good thing to have to pay a lot of money to Uncle Sam, because that means you're successful. That means you're making good revenues. So 1988 was a bad year. And then 1989, remember the Tiananmen incident? That was the year of the Tiananmen, June 4th, Tiananmen incident. And because of the political turmoil, my specialty being helping American companies, particularly American manufacturers, export their products to China and Asia. Nobody wanted to go to China. I didn't want to go to China myself because of the political chaos. Luckily, I found a job within an hour's commute from my home in Philadelphia. But something happened. I found a job, and the job made me realize one more time that I would be happier working for myself. I like to do my own things. I can work for bosses. It's not like I don't stand bosses. But you know, if you are an employee, sooner or later, you are going to get a boss who is not going to like you or with whom you have differences. And to me, those years, 1990 and 1991, when I was making good money, being employed, I was miserable. I went into a midlife crisis. And the gist of a midlife crisis was essentially a sense of failure on my part. I thought my business failed, my consulting practice failed. I daily reminded myself as I was commuted between Philadelphia and this place that I was a cat person. It was very sad. Enough of that. I did one smart thing. During that 1.5 years when I was working for someone again, I had asked 2 clients. I said to them, look, we're not going to China and I'm going to be working full-time, so you cannot call me at work. Would that be okay? Would you still want me to work for you at night and during the weekend? They both said yes. So when I say they, I will label them client number 1 and client number 2. I need to do that because I have other stories to tell you for client number 1 and client number 2. So in about 1.5 years, that was just about the longevity of me as an employee. I quit. I couldn't stand it anymore. I didn't want to turn into a Rambo and take a machine gun and gun down everybody. That's not me. And so I restarted my consulting practice. One day, in restarting my consulting practice, I got out of bed. I remember that moment. I stood up, got out of bed, I stood up and looked at the sky through the clear window. And I said to myself, James, ask for a retainer. Don't try to do work by the hour. You can't do this forever. Get some stability, get some predictability of income in your life. And if the client whom you ask is not going to say yes, then relinquish that client. Luckily, client number 1, remember I mentioned working for 2 clients on the side at night and over the weekends. Client number 1 luckily said yes. So I got my first retainer, and that was about the 10th year of my practice. In short, let me summarize. I'm not stopping, but I'm just this point, I want to get it out, that it took me 10 years to muster up the will to ask for a retainer of a client that I had been serving, billing hourly by the day in and day out for 10 years. So I still consider myself lucky. But even though I was lucky, I had yet to develop the ability. Remember, will and ability. I had yet to develop the ability to ask for a client with ease for a retainer. It took me another 5 years before I could do it. And 5 years later, something happened with client number 2. You know, there are tricks and skills and training that one needs to have. In a way, asking for a retainer for consultants would be an advanced level skill. The newbies won't do it. They won't do it right. Okay, let me give you a specific incident that allowed me to ask client number 2 for a retainer. You see, I was starting a joint venture for client number 2 and the Chinese government. And in order for the joint venture to continue, my client had to send some documents to China. And the director in my client company, client number 2, thought that, oh, it was just simple. So she first sent something through the United States Post Office to Beijing. 3 weeks later, the people in Beijing said, where's the stuff? We didn't get it. So she tried DHL, again, a month or 2. The people said, we didn't get it. She tried FedExing the whole set of documents. Another month or 2, the people in Beijing said to the director, what's happening? Where's the stuff? We need the stuff to continue, to go on. By that time, the project was delayed for at least 6 months. It was really a real dumb, stupid barrier. And, you know, much of what I do is to understand and psychoanalyze China's culture and the mindset of the Chinese people. And I got an inkling, I got a hunch as to what could have gone wrong. So I told the director, don't worry about it, let me handle this. Just send me the set of documents, I'll deal with it. And I got the document, and I came up with a way to walk to the post office a few times and send them out. Every single package I sent out arrived on time, quickly, within a few days. So I got it solved. Now, remember, I was billing client number 2 at that moment, after 15 years, by the hour. So the end of the month comes, and I have to write my invoice. And in my invoice, I decided, oh, walking to the post office, you know, so many hours or so many minutes. And then the director comes to me, James, this is not reasonable. You can't bill us for walking to the United States Post Office just to deliver some document. I made use of it as an angle to ask the guy who hired me, the vice president, for a retainer. Essentially, I said to the VP who hired me 15 years ago, 15 years before that time, I said, look, what you want is not my body. What you want is the way I think. What you want is the value that I can bring to your company. If 3 American institutions, the United States Post Office couldn't help you, DHL could not help you, FedEx could not help you get some documents to China, but I could. So what's my value? Give me a retainer, or else I won't work for you. Not one more minute. The day after I had said that, the guy called me. It's in the morning. I keep a diary, so I know what day, what time. And he said, James, I'll give you a retainer. Whatever number you want, because he knew. So that is how I got my second retainer. Now I'm about to come to the end of my presentation, but not yet. Give me 5 more minutes. So it took me 15 years to get 2 retainers from clients I had been billing day in and day out for 15 continuous years. At that moment, that was 1998. At that moment, 2 other things in my mind, in my psyche, in my emotion, in my psychology, 2 things happened to me. Thing number 1, I grew up. I knew what I was doing. I said to myself, honestly, I know how to help any company with the right criteria, right preconditions to sell successfully in China. See, this is me talking to myself. I don't need to lie to myself. I don't like to lie to myself. So I decided no more kid stuff. I am no longer willing to sit at the kids' table. I am an adult now. And if I run into a company, a new client, a new prospect, a manufacturer that has the right conditions, right requirements, by my judgment, I will need a retainer. Why? Because I cannot depend on the engineers and the scientists and the lab people and the VP and even the CEO and the shipping department and the manufacturing department and the quality control engineer. I cannot depend on them to guess what the Chinese may or may not do. I have to be in the kitchen. I have to be in control. I take ownership of this whole China thing. I take ownership. I don't take over the company. I know I'm not the owner, but I take ownership. That's point number 1. I grew up. Point number 2, and this is equally important. Again, back to the will and ability. By the time I got my second client, by the time I converted 2 clients into a relationship, billing by value instead of billing by the hour format. Somehow, I think I kind of felt like metaphorically, I learned how to walk, and then I learned how to run, and recently I even learned how to fly. So from that moment on, beginning in 1999, soon after I got 2 retainer clients, from that moment on, I found it easier and easier when the right prospect comes along. I ask for a retainer agreement, a sum of money, 12 installments. I don't write you monthly reports. I take ownership of the whole thing. Everybody has to copy me in your company, except your cats and your dogs and your mouse traps. They said yes. So, beginning in 1999 until now, a total of 23 years. Over this stretch of 23 years, I have been working with retainer clients on top of doing billable work to clients who, even in my opinion, would not give me a retainer or wouldn't be appropriate. You know, if a college asks me to teach a course, it's not a retainer. If a multinational comes to me and asks me to review a marketing plan or a China strategy, a white paper, that's not retainer. If a big multinational comes to me and say, James, would you put together a one-day course on China? Tell our people everything they need to learn about China. Not a retainer. When the American Management Association came to me and asked me to teach all over the world a 3-day course on China, that's not retainer. So ladies and gentlemen, I am not telling you that every client will become a retainer client, even by me. But it's very important for me to feel that I can do it. And I have benefited over the past 23 years. You know, a few things happened when I could only speak for myself because that's my life. I've lived through it. Once I learned how to ask for retainers from the right people, you know what? I kind of felt I no longer had that lean and hungry look. You remember what I'm talking about? As a consultant, have you ever looked at the mirror and noticed that sometimes when your 2 feet are not strong enough, you are weak-footed psychologically? You have that lean and hungry look. No, not good. Number 2, you can start not undercharging yourself. I can dare say that the majority of solo practitioners, unlike the big firms with 1,000 employees and the big law firms, cannot overcharge their clients. On the contrary, we, the soloists, have a bad tendency to undercharge our clients, meaning shortchange ourselves. And once you learn how to ask for a retainer, you know, you look stronger, you look more confident, and you do feel more confident, and you get more because you ask for more. And finally, one more thing. The moment I learned how to get retainers from prospects, I no longer had the FOMO factor, the FOMO effect. FOMO, the acronym FOMO, fear of missing out, FOMO. No more FOMO. For the longest time, my eyes never darted and looked at the advertisement page of any newspaper. And two more things. Retainers are a godsend. Once you have them, you have predictable income, you can plan. Your worries are fewer. You no longer have to struggle day in and day out with insecurity and fear. Fear that you won't hold on to a client, insecurity about the possibility of your own business failure. those worries have been greatly diminished. So one last thing, when the time came when I could legally take my retirement, I think it's 67, I didn't have to because I didn't need the money. And I'm going to end my talk here because on the one hand, I'm going to say something seemingly contradictory. On the one hand, I'm not telling you that you have to get retainers like me. But on the other hand, if you happen to feel you have to have a retainer, I cannot say more, I cannot give you more support than I would, because I think that being able to have the ability to get retainer clients means you have arrived. Thank you very much. And now I want as many tough questions as you can ask me.
Thank you, James. That was a great talk. I think from somebody who has a retainer, I agree with what you say. I think the comfort of a retainer, if you can get it, is the monthly income that comes in every month.
But I also, yes, but Mike, I also want to repeat, for 10 years, I was a disbeliever.
Yeah. I
was fear. Okay, this is a public place, so I cannot use foul words. I was fear, without diddly squat, that to ask for a retainer means to commit suicide. Fear and insecurity. You don't have to admit it. You will know. We all have been children. We all have our own fears.
Yep.
Come on. Hit me with the most vicious, severe, brutal questions. I want them.
Yeah. Okay, I got a quick question then. So you're the retainer. You for a set amount of dollars, you say that you're going to be able to provide services, whatever services they need. I mean, I think I like that. The question I have is, do you have limits, like a lower limit for a number of hours that you spend and upper limits? Or is it, or how do you make sure that they're not saying, oh, okay, well, now that you can do, now that you are with us, we'll use you 80 hours a week? I mean, how do you prevent that?
It is a very scientifically asked question. And that was also one of the reasons I never asked for a retainer, because I also do not want to undercharge or undercount my hours. So I had that fear that I would be underestimating. But you know, in my case, you see, after 15 years, the answer is short. The answer is you have to know what you're doing. You have to know roughly what is required of you per client and how much time roughly. Or by the way, when I say ask for a retainer, that doesn't mean that in my proposal, I didn't put down my hourly rate. I didn't put down the number of hours. I'm just saying, oh, client or Joe or Mary, I estimate for a year that you will need 200 hours of my time at such a rate. So that's how we come up with a number. I mean, there are numerical bases for that monetary sum of money. But after helping people day in and day out for 15 years, at least based on 2 clients, I kind of know what needs to be done and how much time would be required of me. So what is your name? Let me look at Peter. Peter, I am not you, as I am not Tom, I'm not Jim, I'm not Mike. You know, you have to know your business well enough to know when you ask for a retainer and when you come up with a number. I don't care whether it's 50,000, 150,000, 500,000, it doesn't matter. You have to know your business well enough That's the best way I can answer.
Right.
Peter.
I mean, do you have low, do you have per hour limits, either upper or lower?
No, I don't mention it in my proposal. Peter, if there is any guide to you from me, and again, I can only speak for myself, okay?
Right.
I cannot foresee the events of millions of people. Ever since 1999, when I started on my retainer consulting approach, I have never felt I shortchanged myself. Never.
What about your clients? Do they think that they're shortchanging
Good
themselves?
question. Never. Let me add one more thing. I know this sounds ridiculously unbelievable. I'm telling you the truth as I know it. The truth is, there were years when I had 5 retainer clients, in addition to doing whatever transaction work, you know, and in your case, it may be 1 or 2 days of expert witness, whatever. You know, I had 5 of them, 5. And, you know, it's about psychology in a way, but I don't plan to write another Ph.D. dissertation, particularly on the psychology of getting retainer as consultants, because people will starve to death with that Ph.D. dissertation topic. But I can tell you, it's like the buffet. You know, you have, let's say you open a buffet restaurant, cheap Chinese buffet. For $9.99 or $14.99, you can eat till you die. You know what, Peter? If you don't worry that there will be too many hungry people who will eat up all your food like locusts, I never worry. I can't answer you more specifically, Peter. All I can is to repeat to yourself, in 23 years, including this year, I have no complaint from my client. And also, nobody stiffed me. I have not been stiffed by my retainer clients, none. And also, let me tell you one more fear that I had in the first 15 years of my consulting existence. My fear was, if I got a retainer, what if, oh gee, would the retainer be like a shackles? You know, I've been shackled, I've been capped, I've been chained up. Oh yeah, actually, in 1984 or 85, when I got that client in New York, the owner of the company jumped at me. I mean, literally jumped at me physically. I don't know. It's not a complaint. He said, "James, you want a retainer?" He scared the thing out of me. I thought he was trying to trap me, that I'm a mouse and he's a cat. And the fact that he jumps up on me only makes me afraid of wanting a retainer. But you know what, Peter? Have no fear. Even if you have a retainer agreement with a bad and toxic client, if things don't smell good, you can always say, hey, take 5. Stop. See, I can't answer you more bluntly, nakedly, and crudely than this. You have to ask the goddess of mercy to answer your question.
Okay, thank you.
I think on that note, we had a question on the chat, which was similar. How do you determine the dollar amount of your retainer for client 1? Was it based on your average hours or based on previous years? So, James, how do you figure out the dollar amount? I know you try to give Peter an answer, but is there any more expertise you have to give?
Yes. First of all, you have to understand. I had been consulting with that client on an hourly transaction basis for 10 straight years, day in and day out. So each year, the client knew how much they had paid me. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah? No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So after 10 years, you kind of know the average, right?
Yeah, I agree.
My client knows the average. Yes?
Yeah.
And it's not that hard to come up with a number based on that average. You may want to charge a little more. That's okay. And also, for the person who asked that same question, I have something shocking for you, just like what I have answered Peter, something even shocking. Let me tell you the truth. As I experienced it, that shocking incident, that's client number one. Okay, so client number one was the first one to give me a retainer. And then a 2 years later, kind of business in China dried up. Oh, it was a horrible year. We got very little orders. We got very few orders. I felt bad. And I was actually psychologically prepared. When I see the client on that day, that the client would use that opportunity to tell me, James, I love you, but there's no business. I have to kiss you goodbye. Peter and the asker of this question, let me tell you what happened to me. I took my shower in the morning. I put on my suit and tie. I go into the boardroom. My client sits down with me. And luckily, I had been, let me say it this way. The night before that meeting, Marianne Shake, a lawyer friend of mine, whose story I have included in my book, Spare Room Tycoon. You can find her name, Shake, just like Shake, the razor blade company, Marianne Shake, S-C-H-I-C-K. I said, Marianne, tomorrow I maybe can because there's no business. And my client is a very good client. And I really don't feel good asking for so much money when there's very little business. How can I justify myself? Should I tell the client, why don't you just drop me for a year or two and wait? Marianne Shake said the most wise thing I have heard. She said, James, it's not your place to tell the client what to do. You just go in the morning, sit down, and don't say anything. So I am very obedient. I go into the boardroom, smelling fresh, looking sharp, and paying full attention, but silent. The client said, James, about your retainer, I want to do two things to you. Number one, I want to raise the amount for you. You hear me? I want to raise your price for you. And not only that, I'll give you 3 years instead of 1 year. End of story, honey. End of story. End of story. James Chan, no need lie to you. There's no point. That's life. Life is more miraculous than any of us thinks. You may think cynical about people, skeptical about people, the worst about people. Sometimes good things happen. And that's what happened. And I'm going to stop for now. I have answered your question, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you, James. So we have a couple more questions on the chat. So one question is, are your retainers refundable? Or do they come with some contingencies with certain clients?
My retainer agreement is very short. Very often it's only 1 page in plain English. Even a person with a junior high education in China learning English can read it. No, it's not like a 60-page legal document from Microsoft. And essentially says, I will work to develop the China market for you. The sum is so much. The monthly sum is this much. I am on call. That's it. And renewable on a year-by-year basis. It's very simple. Nobody has ever asked me to refund anything. You see, in the end, it depends. Now, I sound like I'm twisting your arms to get a retainer. No, please don't get me wrong. Let me say it one more time. If I am somehow too loquacious to make you misunderstand me, no, I'm only telling a story of my own consulting life. I can only speak for myself. And not only that, I have told you umpteenth times now during this Zoom session that I hated retainers. I disbelieve retainers. I had all the fears and worries about refund, back fund, no fun about retainer. None of that shit ever happened. None. Now, does it apply to you? I can't say. You have to find out for yourself.
Well, one follow-up, do you have any hourly limit on your retainer? That I'm going to work this amount of hours per month for this amount of money? Or is it something with hours?
No, for a retainer, for my client, number one, I remember recently, 1 year, my client was very, very gentlemanly. Something happened in China, and it happened again, like big problem. And my retainer included like one trip. I can go one trip because I can't. I mean, if a client pays me a sum of money, they can't expect me to fly to China every single freaking day of the year. I'll die. I'll just literally die. So the client, being gentlemanly, didn't force me to go to China with them, but I knew I had to be there. I must be there. I just must be there and work with our agent and not everybody. I basically had to pick up the phone. My mind wasn't calculating. Am I giving my client too much time? I don't care. I just want to get the work done. I know I need to be there.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. So in other words, if you are calculating, your client will be calculating with you.
Okay.
It's like getting married. How many whoop-de-doos do we need to do a week? If you have to calculate, the marriage is going to go down.
Okay. We have a couple more questions. We had one on, can you speak a bit about identifying and building the relationship that warrants the retainer?
Yes. After all these years of doing my song and dance, which is really basically what I do, but song and dance in terms of dealing with two cultures, which the Chinese culture and the American culture, which even when I was a boy, I knew they would never match. Like they're like cats and dogs. They think they understand each other. They never will. And that's why early on, even as a child, I knew I could do it. Now, what has this to do with answering your question? One thing I have learned as a consultant, you can't just do your work and then put in your hour and not let people know how you do it so that they kind of see, you are really good. In other words, a working consultant is also like an actor on stage. You have to let your client, when I say your client, I don't mean just the CEO or the VP or the director of manufacturing or the quality control department or your shipping department or even the clerks. I let everybody know as far as possible why I do what I do, and they are impressed. In other words, as you do, market as you work. You get me? Market yourself as you work. You know, you get married with somebody, you still have to look good. You can't look like a dumb, like a piece of garbage every single day. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's real. It's real. I think that particularly technical people forget the idea you're not just doing work. You also need to demonstrate you are good. You are a miracle. So that's one answer to your question. Another answer is that very often in my experience, you want your client to actually witness a very important thing that you are about to do. And when they see you can actually do it, deep in their heart, they know they need you. They won't let you go. They won't let you go. I cannot be too specific because I really cannot be too specific. That's the best I can do. You can't just function as a Superman, chemist, chemical engineer. You have to double your role as Judi Dench. You double your role as Leonardo DiCaprio. You are the actor. You're not just a cook. You are the super chef. If you cannot do it, you're missing something. Missing something. Flaunt your talent the right way. You need to be remembered. There are still people who will get rid of you, though. I must say. I mean, counting my. I mean, I have clients that last for 5 years, 8 years. I have one that lasted for 12 years. I have one that lasted for 24 years, and I have one that is still ongoing. And part of my feeling is that I make sure as I do my work, I also demonstrate it, so that people know I am not just a piece of nice-looking silver. I know I have a weird way. My partner tells me I'm like a cartoon. You know, I don't mind being a cartoon. In fact, my best client says to me to my face, "You are like a cartoon," but my cartoon works.
So we had a question about can people buy your book directly from you, or should they buy it from Amazon?
You can buy it from me. Just write a check for $25, and because I forget whether it takes $3 or $4 to mail. And I have to go to the post office. I won't bill you, just like client number 2, by walking to the post office. I won't bill you. But yeah, you can buy it from me. But Amazon, you can get it on Amazon. There are a lot of used copies. You can get it on ABE Books, American Book Exchange, ABE, AmericanBookExchange.com. Anyway. And you can even read. I know that people have pirated it, and so you can get a free, you can get a Kindle copy, Kindle legitimate on Amazon, and you can also read. I never downloaded the pirated online version of Spare Room Tycoon. So right now, I really, Mike, when you ask me to talk, this is what I want to talk about, and I very carefully want to add one more time. I am not here to force you, to twist your arms, to cajole you, tempt you, seduce you in getting retainer. I know how difficult it was for me. I knew how traumatic, because nobody wants to lose a client. Nobody wants to lose money. Nobody wants to lose business. Nobody. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. But I've done it. I've done it. So back to will and ability. Remember this trite saying? It's trite, but it's true. When there is a will, there is a way. You have to combine what you do know about your own business with how you can, with ease, say to the right prospect at the right moment, hey, how about a retainer? It's just this number. We'll try it out for a year. Something like that. You still have to learn the way to do it.
Yep.
No different from, doing whoopies. Same thing.
I agree.
Same thing.
Well, on that note, I think we've answered most of the questions. I think there was one about, do you request retainers for existing or prior clients? But I think you answered that because your retainers are from existing clients.
In the beginning, I asked for retainers from existing clients, client number 1 and client number 2. But by the time I got client number 2, I felt like, hey, I've learned how to fly now. And there's no point to walk and run if I can fly.
Yep.
And not only that, I think that, this feeling of having arrived as a professional, even though we are one-person businesses, we are still professionals. We are just as professional as when you are making your freaking $500,000 a year as a senior VP in some big pharma. You're still the same person. So give yourself the diamond ring. Give yourself the Hall of Fame that you deserve. Only you can give it to yourself psychologically. Nobody will crown you if you don't crown yourself.
I think that's a great advice. I think on that note, any more questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask one, if I may.
Yeah.
This is Mike Bigwood.
Oh, hi, Mike.
Hi. My experience as a chemical consultant is that most of the projects I'm involved with start with solving a very specific problem. And therefore, I think if I were asking for, and the client does not imagine that it could take a year to solve that problem. So is it a reasonable strategy to try to establish your credentials on a billable hour basis, and then as the project goes into extension and extension, start talking about a retainer?
Mike, I've known you for years. In your situation with a client who has a specific issue, specific problem that needs to be solved, and the client most likely is a major big company, asking for a retainer does not seem to make sense yet. Not yet. Unless certain situations come about when you kind of feel that it requires continuity. In other words, it's like to give you a very, in my case, for years, for decades, and even for now, many people who don't know about what I do, I can tell you, many people don't know what I do. But I do. They think going to China is it. Oh, James, come to China. You're Chinese, you can speak Chinese, do this, do that. And then we'll go to China in 7 days. Oh, we'll conquer China in 7 days. Freaking useless. Freaking useless. I need to be there day in and day out around the clock. I have to scream on the phone and get people to like, okay, clean yourself up. I sometimes have to be the bad cop and this and that. But let me go back. But Mike, I have one more thing. And in fact, your question reminds me of this very thing that is extremely valuable. Many of you are used to working for big companies, the big pharma, the big boys, the whatever, Lockheed Martin, the Westinghouse, it doesn't matter. Boeing, it doesn't matter. You know what? There's one chapter in my book. Do not forget the small companies. Do not forget those companies with 100 employees, 200 employees, 300 employees. The US government has this silly ruling that a company with fewer than 500 employees is classified as a small companies. No, there is a chapter in Spare Room Tycoon. Small companies have money too. Small companies, particularly company owned by owners, not by your wham bang, thank you, ma'am, 2-year-long CEO, are the ideal clients to ask for a retainer because they need you. They may not need the same very exquisite skill that you have, but they may need other things. So my success in getting retainers are really with companies that are classified by the United States government as small companies. They are not small. They are ideal for us. You know, your gigantic ABC company, you know, will want a big consulting firm. Just as one potential client who never became a client saw me and said, James, I cannot hire you. You know, we are so and so. We don't even hire string quartets. So let me get to the point. Smaller companies. Have you ever, Mike? Have you ever explored working consulting with smaller companies and trying your retainer approach when the time is right? When the time is right. Or you look at my resume. I too know I am vain. Don't think I'm not vain. I'm very vain. I'm just as vain as any of you. I like to have worked for Lockheed Martin, which I did. I like to have worked for Westinghouse, which I did. But to me, you know, those are kind of, you know, very good looking ornaments on my resume. The people who helped me make my consulting list are not the big firms. The big firms are my mistresses, period.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm sorry I shot you, but that, you know, you want me. It's like you want me as your speaker. That's what you want. That's what you get. A cartoon, a human cartoon.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes. What questions?
Hey, James.
Yeah.
James, it's Tom DiRenzo.
Oh, hi, Tom.
Hi. The promo for this talk was advertised that you were going to talk about transactional versus relationship marketing. And unless I missed it, I didn't hear anything like that. Maybe that's a subject for another day.
No, I think I see your point. I just try to minimize defining transaction meaning billing by the hour. In other words, Tom, I kind of equate. You may not like that the definition of transaction. I kind of equate billing by the hour and no plan for any continuity as transaction. And I define relationship as, you know, billing by a retainer, by yearly agreement, so that I don't have to justify every single hour of my work. I mean, you are one of my best clients. You were one of my first 3 clients. Unfortunately, you left the company too soon. You know, so I never had the chance to ask you for a retainer, Tom. If you were to stay there for another 50 years, you would be my next.
Okay.
And I would find a way. I would find a way to say, Tom, I love you. Give me a retainer.
Thank you, James, for your usual passionate presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
James?
Yep.
Hi. I've met you at CCN at Quinnet multiple times. Never had the experience to really
Fred.
meet you. This is Fred
Yeah.
Hartman.
Hi, Fred.
Hi. I'd just like to reinforce one of your messages. corporations, the managers manage capital. Businesses owned by owners, run by owners, make decisions based on how they will benefit, not by some metrics that the corporation has. I'm, by the way, I'm really impressed at your talk, your long-term strategy, your transition. I'm thrilled at your presentation. I'm at end of career, so I mean, building a relationship that I can transition into yours is pointless. But this message is being recorded, and so I hope people going forward will learn from you and benefit from you. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Thank you. But you know, in the end, it's still how you feel. You know, what if I never learned? What if I never believed I could do it?
Totally, totally.
Yeah,
One further comment, if I can interrupt.
yeah,
We now live in a world that would prefer not to have employees.
yes,
And
yes,
in a world that doesn't want employees, and where you would prefer not to bill by the hour, if you can identify people where you can be a value add and be a part-time employee without them having all the benefits and all that good stuff that comes with an employee, this is a golden time for your model.
oh yeah, Fred, precisely. But it requires someone who is able to package it, you know, intellectually and even psychologically, package it so that you don't have to say such a blunt, you don't have to say blunt things like, just treat me as a part-time employee. You know, you don't have to pay my medical, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. You still have to present yourself nicely as a professional so that it looks great. It just looks great. May I tell a short story about my mother? She passed away when she was 99.
Oh.
You know, much of part of this part, at least maybe 5%, 2%, but it could be the critical 2%. When I was a baby, my mother wanted me to eat something. They put one dish in front of me. I started crying and screaming and throwing the food away. My mother came up with the idea of splitting that one dish into 6 dishes, 6 little dishes. For whatever reason, I got happy. I said, oh, wow, such a plethora of food. So I started happily eating. You know, my mother told me that umpteen times. It's how you approach people. Don't forget we're humans. Even the big firm company people, if you want to have a relationship with people, you really want it enough, you'll find a way. I think you will find a way.
Well, it's the relationship, it's the perceived value, and most important, it's the trust.
Oh yeah. Essentially,
that.
that's one of the things I've learned, how to create trust, how to show it, how to demonstrate it, and how to, in a way, not measure, feel it.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
And by the way, Tom Duranzo, I thank you for that question. I'm sorry. I like Tom very much because he's so precise. One of the things when I first met him in 1983 and 84, I said to myself, oh, wow, what a great corporate executive. He really knows what he is doing. And he just follows through. He's like a precision engineering machine. Yeah, he's wonderful.
Well, I'd like to give the compliment back to you, James. You were very successful in getting us that China business. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
James, you might mention that one of the great things you did for me was you took care of the other people who were interested in China. So when we went to China and the bosses brought their wives, You were very courteous to them. You took them to good restaurants, explained what was going on. So there was a social side to what you did besides your business knowledge.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, the social side is actually what I should have mentioned that about when I said you have to market as you do your work. It's the environment. You create the environment, you create the atmosphere, you create the zeitgeist where people feel comfortable. And as they feel comfortable, they are not as guarded and more willing to kind of open to listening to you versus nowadays our politics. Nobody wants to hear about anybody else.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks James for a great presentation. I appreciate that, James.
Thank you very
that
much.
was really good. Well, my wife listened to it too, so she was very, we're gonna both give you a clap here.
I hope she gets some giggles out of it.
She might consult next year, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much.
Do the Chinese clap?
What?
Do the Chinese clap?
Oh yeah, a lot, even if they don't want to.
So on that note, then our next meeting is October 13th. We'll see you then.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.